Hello, hello, NHIO. It's the web shop you need to know.
The web shop everybody needs to know. NHIO, it's the web shop.
Web shop you need to know. Tools, decals, files, and much more. Tools and decals, files, and much more. So don't lose time and visit the store. Visit the store. NHIO, NHIO.
NHIO.
Spend $50 or if you like even more to enjoy free shipping, free gift of your choice. To enjoy free shipping and free gift of your choice.
Free gift of your choice. NHIO, NHIO, NHIO.
Welcome, listener, to The Model Philosopher. In this episode, I'll be talking to scale modeler and movie miniature and prop maker Alex Friedrich. Before we do, though, I would like to thank our sponsors, Anish, who you heard from at the top of the show, Scale Model Challenge, and Hypersonic Models. Let's hear from Jeffrey at Hypersonic now.
Hello, Jeffrey from Hypersonic Models here, sponsor of this fine podcast. If aircraft from the Cold War era are your thing, you build 48 scale models and you're looking for that extra detail, improve accuracy, or want to build that special variant, come and have a look at what's available from Hypersonic Models. 3D printed and cast resin and even injection molded sets as well as decals. Particularly well served are aircraft like the F-4 Phantom or F-104 Starfighter, all available in my shop at hypersonicmodels.com, shipping directly from Japan at very reasonable rates, or buy from one of my partner shops from around the world. That's all from me.
Scale Model Challenge is one of the best shows in the modelling calendar, with a world-leading contest, workshops with people like Peter Usher, Fabrizio Russo, Mamikon, Anna Machowska, Francesco Farabi, and more, and a huge variety of unique exhibitors offering everything from new fantasy and historical miniatures to new and unusual kit releases, books, tools, paints, and so much more. SMC is where the best modellers in the world, from beginners to well-established artists, come to share their passion for all things miniature. I'll be there with the Model Philosopher, and I hope to see you all there too. You can find out more at scalemodelchallenge.com or on the socials. Now on to this week's special guest, Alex Friedrich. Based at the studio in Berlin that Alex shares with a team of film miniature and prop makers, Alex's miniatures have been featured on the big screen in films such as Inglourious Basterds, Around the World in 80 Days, Luca Guadagnino's Queer, starring Daniel Craig, and every Wes Anderson movie since 2014's Grand Budapest Hotel. I spoke to Alex about his work in movies, his own background in modelling, and the nature of miniatures through the lens in movies and photographing our work, and how that plays with concepts of realism. Let's hear from Alex now. Welcome, Alex Friedrich, to the Model Philosopher.
Thank you for having me, Chris. Thank you for inviting me. It's a bit intimidating.
Yeah. Why is it intimidating?
Philosopher is such a big word, and models is usually something nice, a hobby, something light. Philosopher can be very, very deep,
No, I wouldn't say it was deep. It's more a show really about how we think about the hobby, and what we think about when we're doing it and why we do it and things like that, than it is about the how-to. So this isn't a show about what's the best match for Dunkelgelb or olive drab, or how to do weathering on tanks. It's not really anything about that. So we might say, why would you weather tanks, and how would you feel about doing it, but not how would you actually do it,
Yeah,
because there's lots of shows already for that.
yeah.
We're not going to be talking about the essential emptiness of being or anything like that, so we're okay.
All right. So we got that clear.
Yeah. I think the closest we'll get, we might be a bit like the nihilists in the Big Lebowski, maybe. Who knows?
Yeah.
Going around with baseball bats. So, Alex, why don't you tell us a bit about yourself and your background? How did you get into building models?
Well, I think I started a very, very long time ago when I was really small, like maybe 4 or 5 years old. And it was an aunt who gave me a ship, a destroyer ship, maybe a matchbox kit back then in the 1970s. And I have no idea what ship it was, but it was something very simple, few parts. Um, but it was very, I mean, I still remember it. So it must have done something to me. And the next thing I remember, was also in kindergarten. We had this like a block of styrofoam, and we should carve it. I don't know with what tools we carved it, or just with a brush, a metal brush or something. And and then we stuck some what do you call it, hemp string
Yeah.
into it, and then we unraveled the hemp string. It was painted brown, and we painted the surface of the styrofoam green. And I remember I had a little um, a strip carved into it, like a little river, which was painted blue, and it was a landscape. It was absolutely simple. It was very abstract. It was kindergarten level, but it was a landscape, and that fascinated me. And and then there were models all over the place. There were these little Airfix figures, 176 or even smaller, maybe the one with the plastic base. The ones that were a bit rubbery, like not really hard. And then I got this Desert 4, which was perfect for the sandbox to play in. And so I was always into making a landscape and set vehicles and set buildings into it, and more making that than playing around with it. So I think I was making dioramas when I didn't even know what it was, or and sometimes they were very short-lived, just in the sandbox overnight, and then they were gone, that kind of thing. But that was always fascinating, because when you're small and the world is big around you, and you have something that is even smaller than you, then you're pretty big compared to it. And I think that also brings us to another question of yours, which is what is so fascinating about model making in general. And I think it's that when you have something that is small, you have like control over it. When it's big, you may not even realize how big it is, or what the parts are that make this thing so big and working, and can be quite complex. But when it's something that is so tiny as a little plastic tank or ship or airplane, especially with war, which is such a chaotic and dark invention of mankind. Then when you have it small on your bench, you're in total control of it, and I think that makes it fascinating.
Do you think it's a need to control, or do you think it is just the possibilities of control that it gives you?
Good question. Probably yes, because especially when you're a kid, when you're tiny and you live in an adult world, you can't control pretty much anything. Um, it's all up to them, and
Yeah.
your whole life is up to them. And And when you then find something where you have control over, I think maybe maybe there's a need to do that. But then on the other hand, I thought model making was very much like a kid's thing, or a boy's thing at least. But maybe I'm old school, because my son is not interested in models at all. My daughter wasn't very interested in dolls. So maybe that's just 1970s thinking growing up. Maybe today it's different. But maybe with my son it's different. I think he likes to control numbers. He
Yeah.
learns the number pi, 3.14 or something. He's already at number 60 after the comma. He just learns it from memory. And it's just for fun, but maybe for him it's like controlling that number. I don't know, could be. So to come back to your initial question, we moved to Argentina when I was 10, and there were very little toys, and there were a few kids. And while we were there, I discovered a shop that had the whole Tamiya and Italeri assortment that existed back then. That was around 1980, 82. And that's when I started getting serious about it, because I had and there were these before that there were these the Matchbox little dioramas,
Yeah.
a little tank, a little ruin, and a plastic base and two figures. And I must have built a dozen of those. I really loved those because they were so compact, but they were showing more than just a model kit. And but then I came to that shop and I saw Rommel's Greif, the SDKFZ 253
Yeah.
that he used in the desert, and the box art of that kit just totally blew me away. I dreamed of that kit the night before I bought it. So it really made an impression. Of course, the kit was nothing like the box art. But I think back in those days, we were buying more box art than what was inside, really.
Yeah.
Also, talking about the figures, they had a really, almost always a really cool pose, whereas the plastic that was inside, they didn't look that cool. Nowadays, it's different. Nowadays, they're really, really great poses. And also the detail has gone quite a lot better. But back in those days, I think we all bought, if we bought Tamiya, we bought the box art.
I think though when we were younger, the gap in imagination between the box art and the model was smaller. It wasn't such an issue that it didn't look exactly like the box art.
Absolutely, yeah. Absolutely, that's true. Because there was nothing to compare it to, really.
Yeah.
Nowadays, we know what a good figure looks like, but back then, that's all there was. And yeah, so we had to take what we got.
Also, I think as kids, something that kind of looks like it is great, because it's just, you've got the thing. It doesn't, your requirements aren't so high that you need the thing to look exactly like the thing, as long as you've got something that looks like the thing.
Yeah.
I think some
true.
people are still like that, but I think we've obviously, as modelers, most people these days want something that's relatively accurate, and maybe we've got a bit too
Yeah.
demanding in a way. So after the Tamiya kits, where did your modeling journey go next?
We came back to Germany, and it was still a bit like it had been before we left. And in the 70s, anything that had to do with war and the military was not very well seen, especially in toys, and models in Germany are considered toys for kids. So I didn't model very much. There was one other occasion which was very defining for me. That was still before we came back to Germany. There was still in Argentina, and there was this model shop, the same model shop, and they had in their window they had a box of talking about boxes again, but that was no the box art was a photo, and that was the crazy thing. Because it looked like the real thing. It was the Opel Blitz built by Verlinden for Italeri,
Oh yeah.
and I just couldn't believe that it looked so real because it had the weathering and the painting, and you had the background. I think it was only a sky background, but it was a background, so it was like in a real setting, and it really looked.
I think that's the one that's from the front left-hand corner, and it's almost like on the top of a hill with blue sky behind it. Is that the one?
No, it's like slightly looking up to the truck, and you see the truck from the side, the left side.
Yeah, I think it's the one. Yeah, the old yellow top
It's
Italeri
the
boxes.
old, yeah, just a little bit. I think just a little bit of grass on the ground, and it said on the box in on the bottom model and photo by F. Verlinden, and I had no idea what who that was, but it looked really crazy, and I thought, wow, I mean that's the level where you can get to if you do it right. Um, and then, yeah, as I said, then we came back, and then there was not much modeling. And I finished school, and then there's always this kind of this break in a modeler's life when the hormones change, and suddenly there are girls, and girls are not into models, and then you lose interest too, and then there's other things. I finished school, and then I started a civil service. And when I started the civil service, the first thing I did from the money I got there was buy an airbrush and get back into modeling.
Oh right, so only a short break for you.
Yeah, it was a few years. Yeah, but
Yeah.
yeah, I got back instantly when I left when I finished school and left my parents' house and started this service. And I had a small room, and there was this shop that had all the Verlinden stuff, which I had never seen before. And I realized that was the same guy that had uh, made the photo of that Opel Blitz truck for Italeri that I had seen years ago. And there were so many, all these resin details and the first photo etch details, and it was really an eye-opening time, a very expensive time too. Um, there was the fine scale modeler which I bought in Cologne at the station. They had an international magazine section, and they had fine scale modeler, and that's where I learned about Shepard Payne and Louis Pruno and Morver Linden and lots of techniques, and yeah, that was great. But there was always something about models, which brings me back to 1978, and that was when my mom took me to the movies, and we went to see Star Wars. Back then,
Hmm.
only called Star Wars, not A New Hope. And in the opening scene, you have this huge spaceship come into frame from above and filling the frame, and more and more and more, and it's getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and you're like blown away by this image. And then there's laser beams, and you're instantly drawn into that movie. And afterwards, I read somewhere in a newspaper that it was a model that was maybe a meter long, and I was like, wow, that's real magic, because you believe it. You see it and you believe it. When you see a model on a bench, you know it's a model. But when you see a model that is well photographed or filmed and combined with other elements, then you just, yeah, when it's well done, you can just believe it absolutely, and get totally fooled with a miniature. And that was something that I thought that would be interesting to do. as a profession.
So how did you get into that profession?
So when I came to Berlin, after I finished my civil service in Cologne, I went to Berlin because Berlin was like the most interesting city in Germany, end of the 80s. That was before the wall came down. I had wanted to go to Berlin. And then while I was doing the civil service, the wall came down and everything changed. But I still went to Berlin. I think it's still the best place to be in Germany.
Wow. It's one of the most exciting cities in the world, let's be honest.
Still, right? Yeah. Yeah. I think so too. I had an address of a company in Berlin that did special effects. Of course, I had read a lot about Industrial Light and Magic and the effects for the Star Wars films and the Indiana Jones films and well, everything that was going on. It was really exciting, and there were a lot of miniatures involved. Um, And so I went to this company who did visual effects for the Wim Wenders films, like um, Wings of Desire and the second part of Wings of Desire. And I wanted to make an apprenticeship, but it wasn't possible because they had no work at the moment. But I got to meet some people. And through these people, later on, I did find the first jobs working for a special effects company outside of Berlin, building models that they then rigged with explosives and blew up. So that was a very different kind of model making because the models only lasted maybe a day or two, and then they were totally destroyed. But when the thing looked good on camera, then that's what we built them for.
If you blow it up and they don't get the shot, do you have to build another one? Do you always build more than one? What do you do?
So it depends. First, it depends on money. Then it depends
Make get
on
the shot.
time.
It's what you do.
If you have if you have the money and the time to build two at the same time, then that's what we do. But if it's a big model, like the first one that we built was a very famous landmark of the GDR. It's called the Palace of the Republic. It was a socialist building, a big building um, with a lot of venues and restaurants, theaters, cinemas, dance halls. And it was really a palace for the people. But when the wall came down, there were these more conservative people who said, "This thing is ugly. Let's tear it down and put the castle back, the Berlin castle," which in the end it happened that way. And at the end of the 90s, when I was doing these jobs with this special effect company, um, it was still standing. But this TV series that we built it for was kind of preparing people um, for having it blown up, you know, or that's how I felt. So of course it was a very action-filled um, scenario with a helicopter flying into the building and then blowing up the whole building, totally over the top, but it looked good. But so to come back to your question, what we had done was build the building, but the whole facade, which is glass, could be taken out and replaced by another one, which we had done. So we could have done two shots, but everything worked so well on this one that it wasn't needed. And I was glad because it was a lot of work. And then resetting it always is also very stressful work because you have the camera people and the whole crew standing around waiting for you to do your job. Um, and sometimes, like with this building, they had this camera that did 800 frames a second, which is very fast. And it came with its own operator. It was called photosonics. Originally they used these cameras for filming impacts of bullets, to see what is happening when a bullet hits a steel plate or whatever. Um, and they use this for the explosion to later, when you see it, it's all in slow motion, and it's like a huge fireball, and it takes a lot of time to evolve. And in reality, that whole explosion was like a half-second thing. You barely saw it, but the camera saw it, and they edited it well, and so it was, yeah, it looked good.
So that was kind of your first entry into to filmmaking, right? Was working on these action scenes on this movie.
Yes, yes. We built a few more. We also built the TV tower. Um, the whole sphere of the TV tower in 1/10 scale. It
Mm.
was a really big sphere. It was 3 meters in diameter, and it had a restaurant with tables and chairs and ashtrays and all the little details from the real thing. They blew that up too for the same series. And then we built some helicopters, but they were mostly from radio controlled kits that we just modified and painted, and everything got blown up. Everything we did for them. Yeah, so that was those were my first film models. And then there was a time um, when nobody required models anymore because everybody went CGI.
Right.
Everything had to be computer generated to look cool. Um, although a lot of the early CGI looked really not so cool, but there was no one who wanted to work with miniatures anymore.
I think for filmmakers, the attraction was probably that it's a lot cheaper, isn't it, to do it CGI?
Well, it's not really cheaper if you want to make it look really realistic. There's a lot of work of tweaking things so they're not too perfect, because the computer always works too perfect. I don't know how it's going to be with AI now. Probably they built in some random generators of randomness, that things don't look too perfect. Maybe, I don't know, probably. But back in those days, everything had to be done by hand, even though in the computer. But what you could do was you could always say, we fix it in post. Um,
That's the cliche, right? We'll fix it in post.
yes, but, but it's true. Whereas with a miniature, you need to know exactly what you want, which angles you want of that building, or so what's going to happen in that scene. You have to be very precise about all the elements that come together. Like, is this a daytime shot, a nighttime shot? Is there wind and rain or sunshine? Or you have to be very specific when you do it as a model and then shoot it that way. Whereas when you do CGI, you can change the sky and the time of day later, and you can make this and then see, I don't like it. Let's change it a little bit. And you cannot do that when you shoot with a model. So producers and directors like to have all options until the last moment. And I think that was one thing that killed miniatures, almost killed miniatures for a long time. So the people that I met in these years, the colleagues that I found, enthusiasts, model makers, carpenters, painters, sculptors. So we all had to look for something else. And the next thing to miniatures would be prop making. So there were quite a few years where we did mostly props and no models for movies.
What kind of props did you make?
Um, it started with a film called Around the World in 80 Days. Yeah, and it was shot in Babelsberg Studios, so outside of Berlin. And we had a prop making workshop with a British prop making supervisor, Roland Stevenson. He's a sculptor and he's a rugby player. So he's a very, very tough guy, a very lovely guy, lovely to work with, absolutely fantastic, but a machine. And the props we built and the things I learned from him, it was like an introduction to a whole different world. The resins and surface techniques to make things look like metal or wood, or mold making and casting and fiberglass and rubber, and so it was all on a bigger scale than what we had done before. And he was like, for him, it was just like a job. It's like I worked in Pinewood this year. Um, on a film where we built miniatures, but we worked with the whole British team. And when you asked them, when we finished, we asked them like, "What's your next job?" And they said like, "I don't know, probably Star Wars something or Spider Man or I don't know," because there's so much going on there. But in Berlin, you have to look a little bit more like for your next job, and sometimes there's times in between where there's nothing. Like now, you have a few months off. I think in England it's just one film after the other, and that gives you such a professionalism um, in the things you do. People are so specialized and make absolutely beautiful stuff, like really state of the art prop making for big films. That was great.
But prop making is, it's not dissimilar to miniatures, is it? You're just working at 1-to-1 scale because you're still making something which creates the illusion of the thing.
Absolutely. Yes. Yes. It's like maybe it's a bit in between model making and design models, because prop making is usually needed in period films or fantasy films or science fiction films. Not so much in contemporary films because you can buy all the stuff that's out there. Um, Also, of course, action films, all the rubber guns and, well, everything has to be soft where a stuntman falls on. So, so these are mostly what a prop maker would do. If it's a war film, for example, on Inglorious Bastards, we made the weapons for the bastards, the knives and the baseball bat, and then we had lots of guns for the film. In the film, where there's American soldiers trying to conquer a town, and there's this one German sniper I think in the church tower. He's up on top and shoots down and shoots them all, and they're all dead. And he's the hero, and the Hitler in the movie. And
The propaganda movie, isn't it? In the movie, yeah.
it's a total propaganda movie. But what we had to do was mold and cast guns, like dozens of guns, because every time when an actor get, gets hit in the film and he falls down, then you don't want to risk breaking this gun because it's an original, so it has to get replaced by a rubber version, or you don't want them to get hurt if they fall onto their gun, and so it's always rubber that's being used. So we made lots of molds and rubber guns, and sometimes for science fiction, you build some laser guns, like Star Wars stuff, that kind of thing. But it is model making, kind of probably more precise. And then you always have these things with gadgets, like working elements where you can move something
Yeah.
and you have the illusion of that is really working. There's some lights in it or so. Yeah, but otherwise it's pretty much like model making. Yeah.
I mean, the aim of it is to be realistic, isn't it? It's to be convincing on the screen, whether it's a prop or a miniature, that what the audience is looking at is
Yes.
the real thing. Like when a building blows
Yes.
up, you don't want them thinking that's a foot tall. You want them thinking that's the whole building, in real life exploding and stuff.
Exactly.
So one thing I find really interesting is modelers often think what they make is realistic, and in a way, it isn't. If you enlarge what they made to full size, it would look wrong. But there's a sort of a
Yeah.
complicity we have that we say it's realistic, while at the same time meaning it's a realistic looking model, but still a model. We know it's a model.
Yeah.
And I find it really interesting because you started working with on movies with Wes Anderson, and the miniatures in his movies are not realistic, are they?
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. I think it always comes down to a style.
Mm.
Realism is always the interpretation of what I think is real or what you think is real, or what every modeler thinks looks real. And yeah, that always boils down to a style. Or these schools, like the Spanish school of painting models. But you're right. It's in most cases it doesn't look as real as the model maker wants it to be, probably. But I think when you go one step further and you take a photo of the model, and not just a snapshot with a phone, but like a real photo, probably taken outdoors with sunlight and a good background, I think then even a model that is, whether maybe the weathering is a bit overdone, or it's painted not so realistic, the light can do a lot to make it look realistic, especially sunlight.
I mean, the movie camera does. That's what That's how it works, isn't it? The way that it's lit on set and the way that the cinematographer works it is they're using it to help. It's not just the model that creates the illusion, like you say. It's the way it's filmed and things.
Absolutely.
I've been to your studio and I've seen some of the models you make for movies, and
Yeah.
there's a different. It feels like there's a different requirement to make those models look realistic on screen than modelers would have to look realistic on a table. How do you think it differs?
Well, I think first of all, it's about the size. You build the
Mm.
model as big as you can and as small as you need to. And that is usually dictated by the money you have and the time you have, and practical requirements. You have to move these models around, and maybe you have to create a background, or sometimes maybe it's even just a green screen which gets replaced by a background later. But you try to go as big as you can for a film model, for a film miniature. um, and the painting, um, it it can be pretty rough sometimes. um, And one thing that is definitely different from the miniature models that we build, from the kits we build, is that film models usually are not 360-degree models. Usually you have a viewing
Mm.
side, and maybe the sides to it, and the roof in a building, but usually you see them from one main viewing angle. Although when the cameraman comes, he may change all that. You were referring to the Wes Anderson models, and one thing
Yeah.
about the Wes Anderson models that was always a bit sad was that there was so much detail put into them, but you don't see it because there's one take of the whole model, and that's it. Usually, that's it.
Does he want them built 360 so that he can film from
No,
different angles then?
no, absolutely not. Absolutely not. For the Wes Anderson films, before he starts filming, he already has the film made in a animated storyboard, which is like a cartoon of the movie, where he speaks all the voices, and you have all the scenes, and you can exactly see where the models are going to be and how big they need to be, and if they are combined with some other elements, and then we build exactly to that frame. So in most cases, we even built them with the use of a computer program, which is called Dragon Frame, which comes from stop motion animation, where you can set up a camera and then in front of the camera, like a normal DSLR photo camera. And in front of that camera, you have a table where you're going to build your model. And then in the program, you have on your monitor, you can see what the camera sees, but you can also load that drawing into the camera of what is in that animated storyboard. And then you can slide in between the two, and then you can see how that two-dimensional drawing becomes a model. So maybe you have a landscape with 5 buildings. So you start with 5 styrofoam blocks and you put them in front of the camera. And then you see how big they have to be and at what distance they have to be, according to the lens they are using to shoot this. Because if you have a wide angle lens, it's going to be a very different model than if you have a more telephoto lens. So that has to be decided before the work starts. What lens is going to be used, and then we start. We build the model straight after the drawing, and that is the only angle we will ever see it from. But from that side, we can put in all the detail that we can in the time given. So that is the process of building the models for the Wes Anderson films. And then usually the lighting that they do, for example, Grand Budapest Hotel was built in Babelsberg Studios. When they filmed it, they just rolled it out of the studio, and in a corner where the sun wasn't getting into, um, they set up the model with a green screen behind. So it was only daylight, and but very very flat light. So there was no extra light on the details to make it pop or make it look nicer. It was just the flat light that we had in that corner that got reflected from the sky. So that's why the models always look a bit flat. But that is the style of his films. So they become part of that style. He shoots the rest of the film in the same style, and then you don't question it. It's just part of the whole style of the film.
He has a very strong style, which is consistent, as you
Hmm.
say, across the film. The miniatures, though, I always get the feeling he wants the miniatures to look like miniatures, that he wants the audience to see that they're miniatures while simultaneously accepting them as full-size real things.
He wants to make the models look like models, so you can see they are models. I think so. Yeah, yeah. He likes miniatures, and it gives his films something a bit quirky. You're not absolutely sure what you're looking at. Is this a model, or is it just painted, maybe, or is it real? It's just the light that is strange. But there are some models also. For example, in Grand Budapest Hotel, there was this an observatory on top of a mountain, and that was
Mm.
also a model that we built. But he had little people animated into that model, and the whole thing looked strange, but not necessarily like a miniature, because you couldn't tell where the miniature ended and where the set with the people started. and the mountains. So the whole scene was much bigger than what we had built, and there were mountains in the background which were, I don't know if they were computer generated or hand painted, and then combined with the model, and then you have other elements like fog and uh, and the walking people. So it becomes a picture that is quite complex, and in some it's really obvious that it's a model, but in others you may have seen it and not realize it's a model, really. But some are, yeah, it's true, they are very, very model-esque. But then, for example, he did 2 stop motion films where everything is built in miniature. So I think that influenced also the style of his later films, that he just doesn't care if it looks like a model. Just becomes part of his world.
Well, as you said, the whole thing is very controlled, isn't it? He has his style. I mean, I'm thinking back. Probably the first one of his films I saw, it's not his first film by a long shot, was The Royal Tenenbaums, and that's a very different. That's a much more sort of naturalistic film in the way it looks, and it's
Yeah,
obviously something that's evolved over time.
yeah.
And perhaps it's getting more extreme with each one. I've not seen the Phoenician Scheme yet, which I understand you also worked on. So I
Hmm.
can't say whether, although it from the trailer, it looks a lot like Asteroid City in the terms of the palette and the style of it, if not the actual content of the film.
Yeah, but it's more watchable. It's very crazy. But what Asteroid City had was this meta levels upon levels, with a theater show and a TV show and a movie, and it was all the same, but it wasn't, and that I think made it quite complicated to follow along, um, at least for me. And this one is a bit more straightforward.
Mm.
Yeah. And in this film, in the Phoenician Scheme, there were um, actually no miniatures that were being used as for the real thing. There was just one model that we built, but it was a prop because it's being presented on a stage, and it's a it's a pretty big thing. It's 6 meter 40 wide and 4 meters high, and it's a model of the lifetime project of the main character.
Mhm.
It's a kind of an energy construction. It's a dam, an
Oh, like a
electricity
hydroelectric
dam,
dam or something.
a hydroelectric dam, and but the miniature has buildings on it and funiculars and a train um, running around and ships in a canal, and it has steam coming out of chimneys and lights and water flowing, and so it was a really complex thing. Took months to build. And you also, in the film, you also only see it as a complete thing, so there's no close-ups on all the detail that was there. Um, but yeah, that was the one thing we built for that film. It was like a little bit like the mother of all movie miniatures, because it had everything in it, and everything was moving, and what must be in every Wes Anderson film is a train, and it also had a train.
He has a thing for funicular railways as well. I seem to remember there was one in another one of his movies.
There was a funicular in Grand Budapest Hotel as well. Yeah,
Mm.
I built that one. That was a nice little build after the real cabin that they had with the actors. And in this one, it's you barely see it going up the mountain on the right side and the left side. You have these funiculars with those little hanging cabins, and they were working. They were really going up and down the mountain. It was quite a complex thing, and a bit fragile also.
So the whole model itself had the movement and the effects built into it.
Yes, Yes. We had a train running, coming out of a tunnel, and then going across on the front over a bridge, and then disappearing in a tunnel again, and ships coming out in water, and then you had the water flowing down from the dam wall. And then this guy goes up on the model while the main character is presenting it. This guy, should I spoil this now or maybe not?
Well, the movie's in cinemas. Maybe it's too early for spoilers. So maybe let's say there's a
Okay,
dramatic effect that people should watch out for.
there is a dramatic effect because we built that whole model again, um, because the whole model gets destroyed. I'm not going to say how, but we had to build it again, and we had to build the face of that dam 5 times for testings and then for real.
Oof.
And so we had the train, and we had the ships, and we had the rocks and the buildings and everything twice. Once in nice, and once in for breaking up and getting destroyed. So we built 2 models for that film. But other than that, there were a few props that we made. So it's also like in Asteroid City. I made some. I didn't work on miniatures really. In Asteroid City, there was this the UFO of the alien that we built, but I wasn't involved in that. And the train for the the start sequence of the film for the beginning. And I worked on the train when we were filming it, but I didn't build the train. I just made props, and which was also nice. It's a nice combination with Wes because everything is the same style. It's usually 1950s, and things look really, really nicely made. They have this kind of lovely quality to them, which you wouldn't find in a prop for a Mission Impossible film, probably, or Star Wars.
Your own models are quite cinematic as well. I'm thinking particularly the Chernobyl control room you did a few years ago now. I think 3 or 4 years ago you took to Scale Model Challenge, which looks a lot like a movie set or like a theatre set. Does your movie work influence your own scale modelling?
7 years ago, Chris. Already.
7? Oh,
6
we're
or 7.
old. We're old.
2018 or 19, it was before COVID. Yeah, it's terrible.
Anything after 2015 is this year to me.
Yeah, okay. We can agree on that. I just built that control room the other day. That was a photo that I found on, I don't know if it was on Facebook or somewhere on the internet, of this Russian photographer, and I thought, this is cinematic. This is just so such a strong image.
Yeah.
I asked him if I could use it and build it, and he had no problem with it. And so I think, yeah, when you work for film, but I think also, I do a lot of photography, as you know, a lot of architectural photography, decayed architecture, lost places, that kind of thing.
You went to the zone yourself, didn't you, a few years ago?
Yes. But that was difficult because we had very little time, and there were people running around all over the place wherever we got out, because we were 15 people in a minibus, and so I always had to run in front of them to take the pictures without these people. So I couldn't really look for the nicest angle or so. So that was a bit stressed. It was more like documentary feeling kind of pictures that I took. But we had places here in around Berlin, old hospitals and old barracks from the Nazis and the Soviets, and sometimes you go into a room, and the way the sun lights the room through a window, there is never any artificial light. It's always sunlight or the absence of sunlight. or sometimes light being filtered through leaves, and then the whole room feels like green because of this greenish light that comes through the leaves. There's a lot of cinematography there as well. I think that was a lot of I got educated in a way by taking pictures of these places, and I'm sure that also influences my models. Definitely, yeah. Yeah, it's like there's always like there has to be something going on and a certain staging of the elements, and you have to find a certain way to make the base look not too prominent but to support the whole scene. And yeah, there's many elements to make it look good and satisfying, and the cinematic aspect is definitely a big part of it. Yeah.
How does that sort of manifest itself in your modeling, your own modeling?
How does it manifest itself? The cinematic aspect, you mean?
Yeah, how do you bring it into your models?
Mm, well, sometimes, like in the Chernobyl power plant control room, it's just a photo that I take, and from the experience that I have from working with Wes Anderson, for example, I take exactly that frame and use it as the opening for the box where the room is in. So you have only this point of view. For other models, it can be quite what do you call it? Um, Sometimes things happen by chance. You play around with the elements you have. For example, some years ago, I built this Berlin railway structure with a broken arch of a bridge, and I just loved um, the whole three dimensionality of that building. And at the same time that I was building it, they were tearing down the original. So it was a bit like I have to give this, I have to make a homage to this architecture, to this forgotten corner of some railway station, which will be gone, and then nobody remembers it. And so I started with this idea of the building, or the part of the building being the main actor in that scene. And then I found some figures by chance which complemented it quite nicely, and that just happened, over time. So sometimes I'm pretty sure what I want from the start, and sometimes it's very open, and yeah, it's just like playing around. Let's see what happens. Let's see how this ends up. There was this truck that I built, the Soviet Ural truck, and I wanted it to break through a concrete wall and then have it fallen down a slope. And in the end, the concrete wall disappeared totally from the scene, and it's not fallen down a slope, but it's hanging over an edge of an abyss, kind of, rocky ledge. So sometimes, yeah, it's very very experimental, but not always. Some of the stuff I'd made when I had for a short time, 2.5 years, I think, when I made artifact miniatures, like diorama accessories, the Pripyat city sign. Before I could even sell it, I had to build one. I had to paint it. I had to weather it. I had to make a scene with a figure, photograph it. So I had a box art, and doing everything yourself can be very rewarding. But it's also like everything you don't do, nobody does it. So you have to do every little step.
I know those feelings.
Casting of the pieces and the packaging and everything. So that took away so much time, um, and made modeling a job instead of a joy. Um, so I decided to stop that again. Um, yeah, and and I never looked back. It was fun while it lasted, and it lasted a very short time. But it was great. And then having Yen from Yen Models sell my stuff at the Scale Model Challenge, and that was that was cool.
One of my favourite things I was going to say you've done, but you're still working on it, is your brass Jeep you're working on, your all metal. What is it? 1/9 scale Jeep,
1/7 scale,
one
very odd
seventh scale. You
scale.
have to be different, don't you? People do 1/6 and 1/9. You've done 1/7.
Why would you want 7 scale? There's nothing in 7 scale. In fact, there is, or there was. When I was growing up, I had these action figures, and they were called Big Jim. They were American. They were from Mattel, and they were like a response to GI Joe, but they were civilians. They started as sportsmen, so you had all these sports outfits for them. And then
Yeah,
they had these adventure themes, safari and mountaineering and a sailor, and you even had a catamaran for them, and a camping van and a dune buggy and lots of stuff. And I loved these figures, but there was never a Jeep. And I thought the Big Jim, from the proportions, they were really very nice and much nicer made than the GI Joes as well. They had these rubber arms with a mechanism inside, so when you flex the arm, the biceps grows. You know, it's crazy stuff. I mean, nowadays,
wow.
I think much too expensive to produce. But in the early 70s, they were everywhere. Everybody had them, and I had them too. So, but there was no Jeep. So when my son was born, um, sometimes I had really long nights where I couldn't sleep. I started to collect thousands and thousands of photos of people restoring Jeeps, to get all the details because I didn't have access to a real one. And and then I started grouping them in folders, you know, engine and frame and the body, and then I started making drawings, and then I thought, what scale is this going to be in? And 1/6 was a bit too big, and I thought, well, I'll just make it a bit smaller and make it in scale for the big gyms. And then I have already a scale person that I can sit in the model and see if the scale is right. And yeah, and then I started drawing, and then I started making the parts, and then it just took off. And it's almost finished, by the way. It's not totally finished. I still have to make the windscreen wipers
Hasn't it been
and the
almost finished
glass.
since about 2012?
The jerry can is still missing, but it's very few pieces. I did some
Yeah,
this year after we finished the last job, because I thought I just have to get it mostly finished. So yeah, it's almost there, and I still don't know if I'm going to
it's a
paint it or not. But for now, I'm not going to paint it.
it's a very different thing to what you make for movies, though. Is it
Yes,
because you need something that gives you something else after spending all day working on that kind of miniatures?
um, yeah. But when I work on a film, on a model, then I cannot model in my spare time. It's just
So you only
not
do it
working
on the quiet periods when there's no work.
on the off time. Yeah, yeah,
Hmm.
yeah. So there's no way when I've done 10 hours in the workshop working on a film, to turn some brass parts for the Jeep also. No, but what the Jeep model was for me was like an apprenticeship in metalworking. Like I had these parts that I had to make. I didn't know how to make them, so I had to find ways. So I had to inform myself, how did they make the original? Could I make it in the same way? And so I started to learn using a lathe and a milling machine and soldering, soft soldering and silver soldering, and beating copper sheet into shape and bending brass sheet. And yeah, that was a whole new world that opened up by making things in metal, because they have a different quality to them than plastic pieces. And the thing I made it, which was the most important thing to me, was making it in metal, because I had done so much in plastic and wood that I wanted to make something solid, something out of a material that isn't so easily shapeable, that is a bit harder to work with. And that in turn um, gave me a lot of jobs for whenever we did movie props or miniatures. If there's something that needs to be turned, it always comes to me, because everybody knows.
You're the turning guy.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, if it's metal. So for the Wes Anderson film, for example, this year, the Phoenician Scheme, I made a prop which was a watercolor box with paints in them. And they had a box, but it was too shallow because it needed to hide some agent gadgets, a little Morse code. What do you call it? The Morse key, and a little keyboard, and some lights, and so I had to make this lid of that box. I think I'll make a Facebook album of it. So you can see it, because it was quite complex making that. But all the metal work that I had done before helped me, because the prop master just said, give it to your local tinsmith and have it made. But we have no local tinsmith here, or I wouldn't know where to find one who could make exactly this box to these specifications. So I had to make it myself. And that whole Jeep building and knowing what I can do with brass and copper, that helped a lot. So yeah, he was very surprised when I said I made it myself, because I think in England maybe they still have it. Do you have a local tinsmith in Bristol?
I would not know where to find them.
No?
I can't even look in yellow pages anymore because we don't even have yellow pages.
Yeah. See, where would you find a local tinsmith? You have to be it.
I would imagine next to the local blacksmith, the local
Yeah,
horse farrier or something.
that's still there, yeah? You still have that?
No.
No, neither. Mm, yeah.
I mean,
Yeah,
if you want to ask me where to get a kebab or where to buy a pint of milk, not a problem. But a tinsmith, no.
yeah, it's weird, isn't it?
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. You're more likely to find someone now to fix your Wi-Fi, right?
Yeah. That's not a requirement for a Wes Anderson movie, I guess.
Yeah, a Wi-Fi smith.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
I mean, that's kind of what a studio for making movies is, I guess, isn't it? It's someone that no matter what wacky thing they come to you with, you can find a way to make it for them, make it happen, and make it appear on screen.
We have to make it happen, or we have to tell them that it's a silly idea and it wouldn't work. But if there's a chance that it would work, then yeah, we have to find a way to make it happen. Yeah. Yeah, and sometimes they just tell us, like for example, with that train model in Asteroid City, we wanted to do that in a much smaller scale, but Wes insisted that it's 1/8 scale, which is these big metal trains that people in Texas have on their ranches, where they lay a circuit of tracks, and then they sit on their locomotive and they ride through their farm on that model train, which is something that I've never seen here in Europe. But so we had to order a train from the States, and the only person who was free at that moment to build that train, because the locomotive came as a kit in loose parts. It was all steel. It was sheet steel and cast steel, and then you had the wheels and the where the wheels are attached. These little carts, and it was all in bits and pieces. And one of our painter ladies, she was the one who had to assemble that locomotive, and she had no idea of welding. And so we got another person in who showed her how to weld. And so she learned how to weld and built this 8 scale locomotive, which weighed half a ton. And then we had, I think, 10 or 12 or 14 wagons in that scale. And it was only because Wes insisted in that scale that we built it in that scale. But in the end, where we shot it, which was the same set as where they had shot Asteroid City, the film, with the actors, with the little white buildings and the crater, the asteroid crater, and everything. They cleared all that away and laid the tracks for the train. And we had the same background mountains, these Monument Valley mountains, and I think 300 truckloads of red earth to make it look like Nevada or Arizona or something like that. And then we had the train moving through that landscape, miniature cactuses, a few miniature buildings, and it worked really well because it was so big. And that was only because he said, I want this scale, I want this to be as big as possible.
Actually, that goes back to what you were saying earlier. It looks like a real one, doesn't it?
Does it?
It's not one of his miniatures that looks like a. I think so. I
Yeah.
don't think it's a miniature that looks like a miniature.
I think most people didn't even think about it. And that is a good thing, when you don't think about, is this a model? But you just you just see a train running through a landscape. That's what they want.
Well, that's 100% success, isn't it?
Exactly. That's it. Yeah. Then it works. And then,
Yeah.
We were shooting all day from 6 in the morning to 6 at night when the sun went down. And we had all these absolutely fantastic skies with clouds, without clouds, sunlight. It was really beautiful to see how that train was moving through that landscape, and it looked really good, really real. It was really rewarding.
Alex, we talked about realism and sort of which models are realistic and which aren't, and which ones work and which don't. Are there any modelers you like who you think produce really convincing, realistic models?
Talking about a model that is photographed in a way that I'm fooled and think it's the real thing, there are a few. And for example, there's a Japanese modeler, Satoshi Araki. He builds these street scenes with shops and vehicles and a very realistic weathering. And he always shoots them outside in the sun, just like our very well-known colleague Chuck Doan from the States.
Oh, yeah.
He is just incredible. I mean, the blades of grass in his 1/16 models, they look like real grass, like dry grass. And he also shoots it in sunlight, and you instantly get this feeling of somewhere in the West. You can almost smell the scenes that he builds. And there is a British modeler, Roy Wells. I don't know if you know him, probably.
I think
He
so, yeah.
uses, I don't know if it's photo backgrounds, and he has these like small scenes. It's usually one vehicle, mostly German tanks, trucks, a few figures, but he photographs it so well that that there's a real atmosphere there, and yeah, they also Roy's photos of his models, they also tend to fool me for thinking they're the real thing.
I've mentioned it a few times on this podcast. I don't know if you've seen it. Have you seen the covers of the Scale Aviation magazine from Japan?
I don't. Aviation? No, I don't think so.
I think so. Let me just check. I've got one behind me here. Yeah, Scale Aviation. They the editor Noah goes out at 5 a.m. in the morning in the street and puts the models down to get sort of the early morning light and photographs them, and they always look incredibly
Okay,
realistic.
with a photo background.
And like you were saying, it's from the right angle when you see
Yeah,
them from sort of the wheel level looking up.
yeah,
Yeah, with a landscape background or
and
something.
the
They look
flat
really
light.
good. I'll have to
Yeah,
send you some pictures. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, with the morning light, because he doesn't do it usually against the rising sun, if you see what I mean,
yeah, yeah, yeah,
against the
yeah,
dawn, you do get it. It is a very flat light, isn't it? That time of day, it's a lot of it's reflected off the clouds and
yeah.
stuff like that. But I think from what you said, you'd like it. I'll have to send you some photos. But it's got that feel, like you say, from the light that gives it a very sort of realistic feel.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, I think when we started the last job that we did, where I worked in Pinewood this year, when we started it last year, we had a Zoom with the director, and we were talking about what makes a good model. And I said, I think you don't necessarily need a perfectly built and painted model. You can have a model that looks more or less like the thing, as long as the light is right. And when
Yeah,
the models are lit well, you can have a decent model and make it look really absolutely amazing. But when the light is wrong, you can have the best model and it looks. I think that's like one of the laws of filming models. It's these two elements that make it or break it, and the light is more important than the model itself.
yes, yeah. It's interesting because sometimes you see photos of real things, and just because of the way it's shot, it looks like a model.
Yeah, yeah,
It's
yeah,
like
yeah.
you can even make the real look like a
Yeah,
model
that
with the
also
bad photo.
happens. Yeah, that's funny. Yeah.
Alex, thank you. We've kind of run out of time now, but thank you ever so much for talking to us today. I hope people and trust people found this as interesting as I have. And yeah, thanks very much.
Thank you very much, Chris. It was really great talking to you and telling you all these things about a different kind of model making. And yeah, I hope everybody likes it too and is interested. And yeah, thank you, and talk
All
to you
right.
soon.
I hope you enjoyed that as much as I did. I always enjoy speaking to Alex. He's one of these people with an infectious enthusiasm and joy in his work, and I think you can see much of that in what he makes. I find it interesting how movies play with realism in models, how for the most part they are used to make us believe that what we are seeing is actually real, how they often fail in this, such as the water effects in Jerry Anderson TV shows or films like The Dam Busters, and how they sometimes succeed when we don't even know that they're miniatures. As I said in the interview, how Wes Anderson uses miniatures to look real, but at the same time highlights the fact they are miniatures in their style, so that we know what we're looking at as a miniature, but at the same time we suspend our disbelief. It interests me because I think the idea that we make realistic models is usually, except in a few cases, a total fiction that we convince ourselves is true. Vanishingly few models I see at shows or online are realistic. Mine certainly aren't, but I'm not trying to claim they are. Yet we tell ourselves that they are. In essence, this creates a parallel realism that we agree on as modelers, but does not meet what we see in the real world. It has its own visual language and is largely orthodox in that it's shared by large groups of modelers as realistic. Usually this is in two schools that do not agree with each other, but also usually neither is photorealistic. This is not a criticism. I find this agreed fiction endlessly fascinating in how it manifests in models, but also how new modelers come in and adopt it, and how it is never challenged, except in terms of the two schools, usually divided by weathering, that fight over whose is the real reality. Personally, I'm no longer interested in chasing realism. I want to make models that express how I feel about realism rather than realism itself, But everyone makes their own determination on this and in a way finds their own accommodation with the valley between miniature and the real world. Moving on to events now, and for those going to World Model Expo, I want to invite you to a special Model Philosopher meetup. We will be at the Café La Pêche on Rue de Leclerc in Versailles from 1 p.m. to 3 p.m. on Friday, the 4th of July. Many of the podcast followers will be there, I certainly will, and hopefully a couple of the Model Philosopher former guests will be there also. Bring a model in a safe box, it is a bar, and we can share our models and wax philosophical in a nice setting with good company and great drinks. Check out the Model Philosopher Facebook page for more details. Tune in next show for a big announcement, a new event that I think fits very well with this show and our view of modelling. Until then, a special thank you to our sponsors, Anish, Scale Model Challenge and Hypersonic, and to our patrons without whose support I could not do this show. Until next time, take care.